In 1974, Stephen King wasn't yet the prolific author of 60-plus best-selling novels. He was a frustrated writer and schoolteacher living in a trailer and banging out failed books on a borrowed typewriter. Carrie was the novel that changed all that. The story of an outcast young woman with a terrible secret power, this book is a page-turner and classical tragedy wrapped up into one. King's books and the movies they've spawned have become a mainstay of American pop culture over the last half-century, so we thought we'd go back to where it all began. Imagine yourself at the soda counter in a rural Maine drugstore and pour yourself a creamy root beer rum cocktail. It's time for episode 64 of Toasting the Classics, Stephen King's Carrie. Welcome to Toasting the Classics, a podcast. We take something that people call a classic, talk about it, decide whether it's still a classic, and then drink something related to the classic. This time, by the way, my name's Dave McArthur.
I am Clint Lanier.
We are your hosts for Toasting the Classic. We are talking about a book this time, and it's one that I chose. The choice fell to me this time, and I went with Stephen King's first novel, Carrie. I'm hoping this will be coming out sometime near Halloween, so we're doing something a little horror-inflected.
A little macabre.
Did
you notice my copy, by the way? Look at that. This is original. This is a 1974 imprint.
Is that from the first 30,000, the first hardcover print? It didn't do well in hardcover, apparently.
Copyright 1974 by Stephen King. My grandmama used to live in Roswell, New Mexico. She doesn't anymore because she's dead. Her big hobby was going to thrift stores, and Roswell, New Mexico has an uncanny amount of amazing thrift stores. Amazing because they have all kinds of weird stuff in there. I mean, this is the UFO capital of the world, after all.
I was going to say maybe it's the aliens.
Yeah. So my wife and I would go there. My wife's a big Stephen King fan, and we were finding. I think we've got Cujo first edition with the dust jacket. I've got Carrie Firestarter, all first editions with the dust jackets. Grandma would, every time we'd go visit her, she'd be like, "Let's go to the thrift stores," and so we'd walk around and we hit the book section. And
yeah, that's fun. I always get drawn to the book section of thrift stores too. Sometimes you find some weird stuff.
Oh, you find some great stuff. Yeah.
I have, we read Game of Thrones, for instance, in paperback, but over the years, I find at used bookstores and thrift stores, nice hardcover editions of those, from the first runs. And so I have all those great big, huge tomes in hardcover. Cool. They're pretty fun. I have Eyes of the Dragon, the Stephen King one. I have an original.
Yeah. Oh, that's really a beautiful one.
Pretty book.
The hardback, because it's all the green scales and stuff like that.
Yep.
Yeah, we have that one too. When we read Catch-22, that was a hard copy.
Yeah, you had a nice copy of that. That's right.
Dust jacket and everything else that we found.
And my wife also is a big Stephen King fan, but with something we share. It's something that we both read. We usually still get the new ones and listen to them on audio. So I have kind of an informal life goal of trying to read. I think he's got about 60 novels at this point. Yeah. And I would like to read all of them at some point. This Carrie is the oldest of his books that I hadn't read yet. I mean, obviously it's the first book. It's the oldest of all the books, but I've read all the first 15, 20 books, I think. Cujo and The Shining and Salem's Lot, The Stand. I mean, I've read all those. I've read The Stand. That's a 1,000+ page book, and I've read it three, maybe 4 times over the years. That's still one of my favorites. I don't know if I still think it's a great book, but I really still enjoy reading it. Yeah, so this was an opportunity to get me to read a book that I've been meaning to read for years. So I went for it. And like I said, it's Halloween coming up, so it seems appropriate.
Well, I appreciated it because it's an easy read. It's
it's an easy read. Yeah,
it's less than 200 pages. And like you said, it's his first work. And we always try to, with Bill Cosby, we went with his first album, and with George Carlin, we went with so we try to get the first, and especially if people call them a classic. And, it's also considered a classic Stephen King. So
another reason to choose this is that we are trying to document every single thing that happened in the year 1974. Yes. I think we have multiple things.
We do have quite a few. Now that I think about it, I was born in 74, so full disclaimer here. I have never read any of Stephen King's stuff. None of it.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
No, actually, no. I take that back. Oh man, I'm a big fat liar. I have read his nonfiction. I've never read any of his fiction. So I've read that.
You read On Writing or
On Writing, Danse Macabre or whatever. I did read 4 Seasons. Which is has basically Stand By Me called The Body. It has The Shawshank Redemption, Apt Pupil, and then what was the fourth one?
Apt Pupil became a film. Shawshank Redemption's a film.
Yeah.
Stand By Me is a movie. What is the other one? I can't remember if that one's a movie or whether it's Apt Pupil that was the least likely to be. This one, the film came out in 76, so only 2 years after the book came out.
Yeah.
We should probably talk about a synopsis. We were doing an album earlier, so I sort of got in the habit you don't need to do a synopsis of an album, but do you want to take a shot at the synopsis for Carrie?
So in a small town in Maine, surprise, surprise.
Surprise, yeah.
There's a girl named Carrie White who who is the sort of the butt of the joke in her high school.
Mm-hmm.
She's very frumpy and very much a simpleton, and everybody considers her ugly and stupid. And so they're always playing pranks on her and stuff like that. But she has a hidden secret. She actually has a special power called telekinesis.
I was kind of surprised how the book started with just saying Carrie White was telekinetic.
Yeah.
Like it just the book just opens that way. Like that was an interesting.
Let's talk about that. The structure of the book. I mean, I wasn't expecting it. So the structure of the book, there are 3 chapters in this 200-page book. I can't even remember what the first one was called.
I can't remember if the chapters have names. Maybe they do.
Chapter 1 was Bloodsport.
Okay.
Chapter 2 was the prom night, I think. And then chapter 3 was Wreckage, I believe. But within the chapters, it's broken up between bits of narrative. And it's kind of like this, what they would call omniscient narrator. So it's somebody who's speaking from whatever character's perspective they want. And they can also kind of tell the inside story of that person and what they're thinking and so forth. So it's between that and it's bits of that throughout. And like artificial journal articles and
it's like an epistolary novel, sort of the way Dracula is. Yeah,
right, exactly. And so
it's a mixture of the two things.
Diary and stuff like that. Yeah, and Dracula. But so it's like that throughout, and uses it to tell a story of this.
There's a lot to talk about there with that choice, the choice of doing the book that way, because and you know from the beginning what's going to happen at the end. You're told right away at the beginning that there's this horrible.
Well, you're teased that
you're teased, but you know
it's a shame that 200 people had to be massacred to understand that, or something like that. And you're like,
right,
oh, wow. So I know something good is coming up, right?
Yeah. Well, you know something. There's going to be something. You don't know exactly what kind of violent act is going to happen, but there's some of the dramatic tension in the book. And I thought about this a lot because I actually watched the movie too, because I'd never seen the movie. So it's like, oh, I'll watch it. In the film, they don't give away what's going to happen. You're watching it and you're really thinking Carrie might fall in love with this hunk guy that takes her to the prom and things might go well. And in the book,
Sissy Spacek was a terrible. Well, actually, I guess she was pretty good. Now that I think about it.
I thought it was actually a pretty good movie. I thought the movie's, John Travolta was in it. That was weird.
John Travolta was in it.
I was not expecting that. That would be my
the guy that played Tommy. The only other thing I can remember, the guy that played Tommy.
He's in a bunch of stuff in the 70s.
No, he was in this show called The Greatest American Hero.
Yep.
Which is the best stupid show of all time.
I loved that show when I was a little kid.
That was a great show. Anyway.
So there's a lot of dramatic tension there where you're thinking like, oh, maybe this is going to turn out okay for her. Whereas in the book, it's done, the epistolary thing where they give away what happens gives you, it's a tragedy. It's done like a tragedy. It's going to go badly.
It is a tragedy. Yes.
You see, it's like in Julius Caesar, he gets multiple opportunities to avoid his fate, and he just won't avoid his fate. It's like Breaking Bad is the same thing. The guy keeps getting chances to avoid this terrible fate. And Carrie, it's not about her choices. She doesn't make the choices that lead to the terrible fate.
Everybody else does,
the other people do, so you're watching, you're just kind of like, why don't they just leave this poor girl alone?
No, it's a slow moving train wreck, and you've already seen the aftermath. And
I think that's an interesting choice, but is actually really effective. I think
that's where sort of the genius of this is that we really feel sorry for her. Like we start liking her and seeing all of this, seeing everything good about her by the time you get to the end. And so you completely, you're filled with empathy, for her. When it gets to that point, you're like, I don't quite blame her, Right. I don't know if I'd go that far, but I mean, you understand it at least. And centering on a girl who's the butt of every joke. I mean, what kid,
can't empathize with
the worst thing that can happen to a kid in school, including me and probably including you and anybody that's listening, was to be made fun of, in school, to be the butt of a joke and have everybody laugh at you, I mean, I remember this kid that accidentally peed his pants. You know, we were like in first or second grade, or maybe even kindergarten. But that you never live that down. You're always the kid who peed your pants. You know, in front of
you're still pee boy when you graduate.
Yeah, or something, right? It's terrible, and so it's so traumatic. And so this poor girl goes through this her entire life up until the end, right? I had a creative writing professor one time, I think, denigrate Stephen King. And I think that might be why I never really read his stuff. Because we talked about a lot of like popular fiction writers, like Elmore Leonard, for example, is a fantastic writer. And he was talking about him in terms of dialogue and how good he is at dialogue, and that he really is. If you ever read Get Shorty, the dialogue between the characters in Get Shorty was amazing. And then he talked about Stephen King in terms of character development. Yeah. How he really develops out his characters. But then his criticism was that it seems like King gets bored of his characters towards the end.
Oh yeah, his endings are usually too. This one's not. This one is not classic Stephen King. This one is a book from start to finish. The plot finishes up
and
exactly where it should.
Very short, and that might be. Yeah. You know, my Kevin McAvoy, rest in peace. He just passed away from a sudden heart attack. God bless him. He was one of the best writers and professors I've ever had. But he, I think his criticism was of those 1,000-page books that King liked to write. You know, by the end of it, you're so freaking tired of looking at this story and thinking about it and everything else. But you got to get there. And I can't say as I blame him to get bored or whatever.
Yeah, he goes over long sometimes. But even in the long ones, it's like this. They read really fast. They read well. Elmore Leonard's a really good comparison because they're both very solidly middle-brow writers, right? They're not writing garbage. It's not pulp, but it's not serious literary fiction either, obviously. Yeah. But I think both of them are good enough at what they do that people almost criticize them as if they were writing literary fiction.
That's a good point.
It's really not what this is. This is a thriller. You're supposed to turn the pages. It's supposed to be fun to read, but it's really well done.
I will say in the case of Stephen King, I get what you're saying. I think you're right. I think what happened, though, is he gets unfairly criticized as if it's, highbrow fiction because Hollywood has decided to make his books, represent his books in Hollywood. So like his books become like mainstream kind of stories, right? And I will say this, because I know we're going to get to the movies and stuff eventually. I can't think of any movie, with the exception of The Green Mile, any good movie that's been made from one of his novels. His short story,
Shining.
Okay, I'll get that, but that was Kubrick. Kubrick wildly changed it though, and King hated it.
King doesn't like
the final version, and that was because it was Kubrick, and Kubrick just did what he wanted, right? Yeah. Okay, I'll give you that one, and I'll give you Green Mile because again, Green Mile is one of the more recent.
I've neither seen that movie nor read the book somehow. I haven't gotten around to that yet.
I wonder if there's some connection with the Shawshank Redemption, because it really felt like the Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, is by far the best, movie that's ever come out of a Stephen King story. Barely.
I like Shawshank. I like Shawshank a lot. I think you're probably right, but I love Stand By Me. Stand By Me is one of my favorite.
Okay, Stand By Me is another short story, though.
But it's a short story, yes, definitely, or a novella or something like that. It's not a full novel. But I don't know whether I like Shawshank better than Stand By Me. I just really love that movie. I've seen it.
Stand By Me is kind of generational because that was
I think so.
The 80s and you got kids. It's almost like Stranger Things before Stranger Things. You know what I mean?
Oh, Stranger Things is definitely based on Stand By Me.
Totally.
It's kind of like Goonies and Stand By Me. There's
exactly all the 80s stuff.
Actually, I really thought Carrie was good. I enjoyed Carrie. I thought it was a pretty good movie. But I'm trying to think of. Did you see the new Ghostbusters movie? The one with Scott with Paul Rudd in it?
No, I didn't.
There's a bit where he's like their science teacher and he just is really slacking off and so he lets them watch Cujo.
Oh, nice.
Cujo. He's like, this is a wonderful movie about a dog that eats a bunch of people. Here you go.
Yeah. Well, it teaches you about rabies, I guess, right?
I think Salem's Lot was pretty good.
I'm not saying that. They're
not great. Not great though. No,
okay.
not great.
What was the one about the cat people? That was a weird one.
Yeah.
Then there was,
I think is a short story, actually, not a novel.
Then there was one called 9 Lives, which I think was a bunch of short stories. Tales from the Crypt was good though. I like that one. That was fun.
Creep Show.
Yeah, Creep Show.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
I really liked. I liked Silver Bullet. That's based on one of his novellas.
I remember that.
But that's not great. I went back and watched that again with the kids not too long ago, and I was like, I liked this when I was a kid, but it's not that good. Like, it's okay, but
I mean, they're just, and that's the thing. It's like none of them are bad. I mean, they're okay, but as far as really good movies go,
it's funny. It's funny that there haven't been more good movies made from his stuff. A lot of it is his writing, so you could see why the movies don't turn out to be all that great, because I enjoy the way he writes. I like his prose. His prose is it's just easy to gobble up. You know, I was reading this book. I did an episode before about Virginia Woolf, and like sitting down and reading Carrie was such a breath of fresh air. So easy to read.
I imagine so. Yeah.
You know, it was just a pleasant read. I just sat down. I basically just laid in bed and read the whole book like in one sitting. It was just an easy breezy read. So, but we didn't really do the synopsis, I guess. But basically, it's a young girl who's telekinetic. She's always had her power. She's been controlling them, but she decides that she gets picked on at the beginning of the book. Like, to make up to her, the one girl has her boyfriend take Carrie to the prom, which is weird. It's a weird thing to do. I don't know how I feel about that whole bit of the plot. That seems like a strange thing to send your boyfriend with another girl and skip the prom. I don't know. So she goes to the prom, and unfortunately, some of these other girls decide to take revenge on Carrie by dumping a bucket of pig's blood on her head when she's crowned prom queen. And Carrie just decides to murder everyone that she can in the town. She kills a whole bunch of the kids at the school, and then, you know, sets fire to buildings all over the city or the town. It's not a city, but that's essentially the plot right there. Spoiler alert, I guess. But like we always say, you should probably read these things before you listen to our show.
There's also there's all these great subplots, like Carrie has a crazy mom who's a religious zealot, but beyond that, she's like hysterically crazy religious zealot, and thinks that everything is a sin, and going to the prom is a sin, and blah blah blah. And so
she seems, there's no religion that teaches you to behave this way. I don't know whether this is Stephen King's idea of how fundamentalist Christians behave, or whether it's, you know, he's depicting an insane person, but this is not Carrie's mother is not representative of Christians, I don't think. I think that would be a fair depiction of what they're, although I remember I was thinking for something about the way they described the house, and you've probably been to houses like this too. There's some houses that are so religious, like there's so much iconography and such a sense in the house that they're just like really stifling places to go to.
Right.
Like my grandparents, my stepmother's family, we would go visit them, and they were really nice people, but their house just always seemed so stultifying when I was there. There were all these pictures of Jesus everywhere and stuff, and it was a very uncomfortable atmosphere. And I was very much picturing that with Carrie's house and with her mom, although obviously her mom's super, super crazy, not just religious, but
I mean, fundamentalist Christian. I don't think he thinks this is fundamental Christian. I think he thinks of her as more of a zealot, like I said. And it would be more like, you know, talking about an Islamist who, you know, thinks that they should kill Christians and stuff like that. I mean, it's that same mindset. I don't think they're representative at all, and they're not supposed to be representative. I think it's as far out as you can go, you know, and be crazy about something. I will say that I was so disappointed by the way she killed her mom.
Oh, I thought that was kind of cool how she stopped her heart with her mind. I thought that was
just sort of slowly stopped her heart. No, I would have inflicted a lot more pain. Yeah.
I mean, it's still her mother, right? She probably doesn't want to.
I guess not, because she's calling for her mother at the end. You know, I mean, it was sad. It was
so the thing where
tragedy is the best way to put it. Sorry, go ahead.
It's a tragedy. Yeah, it's definitely written as a tragedy, 100%. The thing where her mother controls her mind to the point where she has like no idea about sexuality and stuff like that. That to me, I was reading that and I was like, well, that's ridiculous. Nobody's like that. But then I remembered I just watched this documentary about Warren Jeffs and his cult out in Utah, and they were interviewing these women, and these women had no idea the facts of sex and stuff like that. like until they would marry these creepy old guys, they literally did not know what was happening.
Wow. Yeah.
And I was thinking, so it is possible. I mean, and they were interviewing the actual women, and they were telling me stories. They were like, I had no idea how sex worked. I didn't know anything about it. Like, it was just terrifying to me. And I was like, I guess some people think you're just supposed to repress all knowledge like that.
Well, this is in 70. I mean, it's set in like 72, 73. I don't think they were teaching the facts of life like they are now, you know?
No, probably not. Yeah, not in school, right?
So if the parent isn't teaching it, and I think at that time, just sort of taken as a given that the parents would teach, like that was the realm of the parents. Like you teach your kids that, we're going to teach them reading, writing, and arithmetic. You do the rest of it.
Well, before we get too much farther, why don't we pour our drinks?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So where are we? This was your choice, even though this was my choice. You did a good job of coming up with an idea for what to drink. So,
well, I tried to find a cocktail that had something to do with pig's blood, but I couldn't.
Oh, yeah, no thanks. That would have been off-putting.
Would have been off-putting. I like that.
You know, I realized
it would have been slightly off-putting. So instead, one of the big scenes there's this place, this Kelly's, I think, this Roadhouse or whatever they go to, that the kids go to. It's like a soda fountain where they have a root beer.
Yeah, soda fountain, right.
They have a root beer for a nickel, I think is what it is.
You know what's weird about this book, before I forget about it, is it takes place in the near future. It takes place in 1979.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, that's a weird choice. Why do that?
Yeah.
I don't really understand. But anyway.
I guess so that all of the explication from all those kind of
that makes sense.
It hasn't happened yet. Yeah. You're gonna read about this or something like that.
Right. So I was thinking about that because you mentioned the soda fountain. Yeah. And I was thinking, when I was a little kid, drugstores, actually a handful of them still had a soda fountain. Okay. Like a bar where you could sit and get sodas and stuff like that in the drugstores in Northern Virginia where I grew up. And they faded out as the 80s went on. Like they started remodeling all those. And I distinctly remember the one near my house at the bar where they used to have the soda bar, but it was like they were just storing things back there. So it was just like part of the building, but it wasn't being used at all anymore, which is kind of, I always liked those for some reason.
Yeah, I liked them too.
They kind of have that at Target now. There's always a little snack bar in the Target where you can go and get, a popcorn or a soda or something like that. True. So it's kind of bringing that back to some extent. But anyway, you were saying about the drink. What are we drinking?
Yeah, so this is called a root beer float cocktail. So it's 1.5 ounces of spiced rum. I'm using Captain Morgan. I'm using Captain Morgan as well. A 3/4 cup of root beer. Then it says 1 shot of vanilla coffee creamer. I'm actually just. So give me the ratio again for how much rum and how much of the creamer. So 1.5 ounces of spiced rum. That's a shot. 1.5. Okay. So what's that? What's in a standard shot? 1 ounce? Well, about 1.5 ounces. Oh, okay. So a shot. All right. Or then 3/4 cup of root beer. I think I can eyeball that pretty well. I just realized for some reason they sold me expired root beer. I don't think that's dangerous or anything. It just says the sell by date was August of 2020. I don't think that'll. I think I'll live, but that's. I don't think that will be as off-putting as pig's blood would be. No. And then an ounce of cream. Okay, so a little bit less cream than I did of the Captain Morgan. Okay. Right. I got a Coffee Mate vanilla, which is not something I keep around. I actually never put cream in my coffee. It's not bad. So it tastes like when a root beer float melts. Yeah, which is kind of one of the best parts of a root beer float. I would say so. Did you shake or stir, or what do you? I just stirred this one. Yeah, pour it all over ice and then stir it. All right. I think if you shook it, you get too much kind of water down. I think you'd get too much foam too from the root beer. True. Makes sense. All right. Well, that's tasty. Yeah, not bad. It's kind of like a White Russian almost, huh? Oh, I would drink that all the time. I don't taste the rum at all, by the way. I just taste root beer float. Same here. Which is good. And I don't like root beer, by the way. Which is dangerous. Which is dangerous. It is dangerous. It is dangerous. I could probably drink like 3 or 4 of these. Yeah. There's lore about this book, and I guess it's true. So when he wrote this, he was a school teacher, and he was kind of a frustrated writer. He'd had some short stories published. This was his 4th novel. So he wrote 3 prior to this, but none of them were ever published. he couldn't find a publisher. He couldn't get published. They're living in a trailer, and he borrows.
There's a lesson in there somewhere, huh?
Yeah.
About writing your first book and not getting it published.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And
sticking to it.
And not giving up, right?
Right.
I wonder who I've told that to before. But so they're living in a trailer. He borrows his wife's portable typewriter, hammers out the first 3 pages, and just crumples it up in disgust and throws it away, right? Because, and he talks about this on writing. He's like, here I am, this, late 20s school teacher. He's like, what the hell do I know about what is going on with women, as they go through puberty and stuff like that? He's like, what am I writing? Throws it away. He's just disgusted with himself. His wife pulls it out of the trash and makes him finish the story and says, you know what, I'll help you with the women's perspective. I feel like you have to finish it. He's like, okay, whatever. So he finishes it, sends it off, and it gets snatched up by Doubleday, like right away.
Yeah.
And they send him like a $2,500 check, and he was like dead broke at the time.
His wife is a big part of his success. Like the fact that they've been together since they've always stayed together. She really helped him with this one, maybe even helped with writing it, I think, to some extent. She's a writer in her own.
Yep.
In her own.
Tabitha
herself. Tabitha King, yeah. And also she pulled him out of like a suicidal bout with like addiction and alcoholism.
Yeah.
Like she basically staged like a really heavy intervention and threatened to leave him and stuff like that. And he actually got cleaned up and was, I don't know if he'd still be alive if he was doing what he was talking about, drinking bottles of mouthwash and stuff like that. Like
he was off the rails. He doesn't remember writing Cujo.
Yeah, I've heard that.
He wrote that completely drunk, and
yep.
Sent this off, got it picked up. He at the time, it was kind of funny. His phone service was turned off because they couldn't pay it.
Right.
His phone was turned off. Doubleday publisher, the editor, had to send him a telegram to tell him that his book's getting picked up, and gave him a $2,500 advance against it. So then he used that money to buy a brand new Ford Pinto. My mom had a Ford Pinto station wagon, so I am totally in that era. It's the worst car you could possibly get. Poor guy.
A Pinto, yeah. Well, at least he had a car. I guess they didn't have a car before.
But he even talks about it in that book on writing about how he thought that it would just be kind of a flash in the pan type of thing, and then he wrote his next one, whatever his next one was.
Well, they got a really modest signing bonus, but then I think when the book got optioned for a film, he got a really big.
Yeah,
bonus.
he got a lot of money off.
The publisher got $500,000 for the rights, and Stephen King took half of that.
Yeah.
So if you can imagine the guy writing in his laundry room of their trailer, and a year later he's got a $250,000 check in 1974 dollars, mind you.
Right.
That just, I can't even imagine having your life change like that.
That's what he devoted his life to. He just devoted his life to it. Like that's what he wanted to do. He knew that that's what he wanted to do. I came into it a lot later, knowing I wanted to write and so forth. I wish I'd realized it a lot earlier in my life, but like he did. But, he just stuck to it. Like that's what he wanted to do. Great success.
Might be a lesson in there.
Yeah, great success story. So how are you doing, by the way? We're going to veer off, folks. How are you doing with your writing?
Oh, I haven't been. It's, we just got Alex into this. He's going to be taking classes 2 days a week at this sort of school that's for homeschool kids where they can go and do a class a couple times a week. And I think I may start using that time to write, because right now when I'm homeschooling, it's just, there isn't any time.
I get that. There's
nothing left in the tank in terms of time at the end of the day. So
I will say it takes so long to write. I mean, the book that I finally, it was finally getting published of mine. I started that in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Here it is, 2022. It's going to be 2023 by the time it's actually published. So
yeah, wow.
And it is so much time you got to devote to thinking about it and writing it and revising it and correcting it and just on and on and on.
I did actually rewrite my opening, and I do have something. It is a little different now, and I think I could probably turn it into something to do another round of attempts to get published. So I think once I get a little bit of time, I think I will actually do that. But I'm also considering just starting another idea and writing another book.
Why not?
Maybe coming back to this one later at some point. But
I think King did. He was famous for he would work until like noon every day. He'd get up at like at 5 or 6 in the morning, and he would write straight.
Oh, he's got a really good work ethic.
He is.
Absolutely.
And that's why he's so prolific. I mean, you talk about the 60 novels, and then he has all these novels that were written under, Richard Bachman and like pseudonyms and stuff.
Yep. The first 3 books that he wrote before he wrote this, the ones that he couldn't get published, he subsequently released all 3 of them as Bachman novels. I think it's like Rage, The Long Walk. I haven't read any of them. I don't know if I've ever read a Bachman novel, except I read The Running Man, the short stories. So it must be like a Bachman short story collection that I read.
I think there is, yeah.
But I don't remember what that would be called. He did write those books. And one thing that I could really relate to is he said something about how he just kind of got the idea for this book. And it wasn't his favorite idea for something that he could write, but for some reason he found himself able to write it. So he just rolled with it. And that's exactly what I did with the first book that I actually sat down to write. I look back at my list of ideas for books, and it's not my favorite of the concepts for the book, but for some reason I found myself able to get writing, and it just happened. So there's something to be said for that, for pursuing, I don't know, the path of least resistance for whatever reason. Because some of the better ideas I don't have an opening, and they're a little harder to get going on.
I think he also wrote this at a time when like telekinesis was sort of in the zeitgeist. Like I remember in the 70s, telekinesis was everybody was talking about it. There's this dude that would like supposedly bend his spoon. Yeah, he'd sit there and look at it and use his mind to bend it. It turned out like
is that the Amazing Kreskin?
I don't know. It was some Russian guy or something like that. Turned out he was using like this spoon that was made of like basically wax. And so he'd rub it in the same spot and it just like bend over. It was all complete crap. ESP. I remember Leonard Nimoy had like a series on like unexplained mystery type of stuff.
Something like that.
It's like, the Bermuda Triangle. But then there was also like ESP. He can move stuff with his mind and all this. Like, it was a big part of the 1970s. I think Time Life Books even had like a series about it or something like that.
Oh, I remember the Time Life books.
Yeah, Time Life books.
Mysteries of the Unknown.
That kind of stuff, that kind of junk.
Super spooky commercials.
And so when he came out with this book, it just sort of makes sense. It sort of fits into that time when everybody was attracted to that, because this is not a horror movie or a horror book at all. And it doesn't really match what he's known for in his genre.
I don't know. It's a horror telling of the psychic subject, right? Like, because there's all this, gore and killing and things like that. So there's a horror aspect to this. I mean, it's definitely like,
okay, I'll give you that, but it's not.
I think that's one of the reasons why the tragic format is so effective, is because it's the whole last thing is a lot scarier when you kind of know what's coming through the whole book. I think it builds up to it. So it's, I
don't know if it's scarier, but there's this weird sense of voyeuristic desire to see how she's going to do it.
Right. Well, I think that's a big part of horror, right?
Is she going to make people's heads explode?
Right. That's kind of what I thought. Actually, the way she killed the people was different than what I thought was going to happen.
More efficient, I guess, though.
Yeah, definitely. A little more creative, because she didn't just she killed the mom with just direct telekinetic attack, I guess.
One question I had as I was reading it, how much of, so he likes to use characters kind of across his books. He'll base characters on other characters, or he'll name them from other characters. Yeah.
Did you notice one of the characters in this book had the name of the kid from Stand By Me?
Okay.
Teddy Duchamp.
That's an example.
That's right. the Corey Feldman character.
So that's a good example. But I was wondering, Christine. So Christine's the bad person here.
Bad car.
The bad car. Exactly. In the book Christine.
Oh, Chris Hargensen is the villain in this one.
And she's called Christine like once. I think her dad called her. Somebody called her.
Yeah. I am Christine. I am pure evil.
Her boyfriend Billy, or whatever his name is, or is it Bobby?
Billy and Tommy.
The main character in Christine, the guy who gets the car, essentially turns into Billy.
Yeah, that's true.
With the leather jacket, he's a greaser and everything else, and he's a complete jerk, and he's like abusive. I mean, he turns into the same character.
Yeah, he's kind of like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde thing in that book. Like, he sort of turns into a bad dude because of the car.
Right.
He starts out as kind of a nerd, I think, if I remember right.
In Christine, the car is a Plymouth Fury, a 1958 Plymouth Fury. This book, it's
the car. I don't know what the car was.
It's a Buick Biscayne.
Buick Biscayne. Huh? Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what Billy drives. And you look at it,
I remember the car is in
sort of
1963.
sort of looks like a Fury, but it's not as old as Christine was.
Yeah, my girlfriend in college, her name was Christine. And she had a poster on her wall of the movie Christine and said, "I am Christine, I am pure evil." I thought that was
I would be running at that point. Yeah, I'm really liking this cocktail.
yeah, it's good. It's a good drink actually. I really enjoy it.
But anyway, so I saw that. I was wondering how much of it he took from that. Like for a writer like him, how many of those decisions are explicit or implicit, or if he kind of makes them subconsciously.
Yeah, his characters, I think are very well done in a lot of ways. They're always very compelling when you read his characters. But there's a couple of things. I mean, in terms of the way they talk is always very similar. They all have, and Elmore Leonard does the same thing. He's got kind of his go-to shticks for the way people talk in his books, and Stephen King totally does that. There's expressions his characters always use. And one of the things that's always driven me crazy is every single character is as well read as Stephen King.
Yes.
You get like characters that are supposed to, like, there's a character in The Stand who's like a East Texas, like out of work, factory worker.
Right.
And he's making references to Watership Down and like all kinds of, I'm like, this is not realistic.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, because I think I had thought of that at one time. I think like Sue, there's a part where Sue and Tommy are talking and they're referencing all this stuff. I'm like, I would not have known that in high school. If I was a high school kid.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah, he does that all the time.
Yeah.
Everybody knows about, the romantic poets and things like, like, really, these high school kids in a little Maine town? Like, really?
I don't know about that. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I had thought of that before. I think generally speaking, though, I think I'm gonna give it a shot. My daughter's actually reading Cujo right now.
Oh yeah, okay. Cujo's a pretty good book. The movie's not good, and the book ends in a really downer way. I really didn't like it. I didn't like that book, but it's very good. It's one of his best. But so it's a good book. It's obviously, she's pretty old though, right? She's like 15, 16.
She's 15. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, she's
turned 16. Yeah.
Alex was asking me if you could read Stephen King the other day, and I was like, I think you need a couple more years. There's some material in there that I feel like I'd be abusive if I exposed you to it as an 11-year-old.
I think we actually bought a copy of The Shining at the hotel in Estes Park, Colorado.
Oh, interesting.
The Stanley Hotel. That's what it is. The Stanley Hotel in Estes Park. In their gift shop, they actually have The Shining, copies of The Shining, which makes sense. Sure. Although they don't have Dumb and Dumber on DVD. I didn't understand that one. I don't think there's...
Do they go to Estes Park? And is it Estes Park they go to in Dumb and Dumber? I thought they went to Aspen or something.
They do. It was filmed in Estes Park. And the hotel they stay at is the Stanley Hotel. It's the same hotel. And that scene where he walks through the bar, he's like, "Hey, we landed on the moon." That scene, that was in the actual bar. So we walked into the bar, and I mean, it's directly from the movie.
Yeah.
So we walked up to the bar, and I used to know that stupid movie, every line. So he walks up to the bar, and he's like, "I'll take a bowl of loudmouth soup," right? And so we walked up to the bar, me and my buddy, and we're like, a couple of bowls of loudmouth soup. And the bartender literally rolls his eyes and sighs. He's like, okay. He's like,
wow.
They're not as proud of that movie as they are The Shining. So
I can see that. One of the things I noticed about this book, there's a couple of things. But one of the things I noticed is this is a lot like if somebody decided to write a novel treatment of Jean Grey or one of the other X-Men. Carrie's very much like an X-Man.
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing.
She's got this power. She's got childhood trauma that triggers the power. It's specifically referenced as being a genetic mutation.
It's Jean Grey. Absolutely.
Yep. And I looked it up because I was thinking it reminded me of Rogue, but I looked it up. Rogue actually wasn't introduced until 1981, but Jean Grey goes back to the very beginning of the X-Men. From what I remember,
the Dark Phoenix, I think, and
Dark Phoenix,
basically tries to destroy the world, and
she's very, very powerful, and psychic and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure Stephen King read Marvel comics, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure there's no influence here. Like
there's got to be. Yeah, there's got to be.
Yeah.
Or maybe the other way too. I mean, if you think about it, like the first iteration of X-Men movies, the one that came out early 2000s or late 90s, maybe.
Yeah, something like 99.
Yeah. Like they talk about a genetic mutation and isolating it and stuff like that, which is sort of at the end of this book. They sort of talk about that and deciding that's a genetic mutation and blah, blah,
When there's that little coda at the end where there's a little girl who has the power, like another one. So it's kind of interesting. I don't know where he was going with that. But
that's interesting because that's actually, I think that's directly taken from one of the X-Men movies. It might be from the original X-Men where at the end there's like some little kid in like a preschool, like
that sounds familiar.
Like levitating blocks or something like that.
Yeah, I could see that. I don't remember, but that seems like something I've seen. So
I know in one of those it was like that. It was kind of like making the point like there are more mutants out there.
And they did that with Star Wars with the little kid that picks up his broom.
That's right. Yeah. Maybe they influence each other and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, definitely. I mean, those kind of comic stories definitely would influence things like this. But the other thing I was thinking about is that this is 1974,
right?
Which is way before Columbine, right?
Mm-hmm.
But these stories, these like school shooting stories, that's like what this is. This is just somebody doing a school shooting with telekinesis, basically.
It's a good point. I hadn't thought of that.
And I was thinking, I was like, oh, it seems like it's before that time, right?
Yeah.
It seems like before the school shooting thing, which it kind of is because Columbine, I think, was really where that really got into our minds. But there was a story, there was like the guy in Austin that went up on the watchtower, on the water tower and shot people. Yeah. And there were incidents like that. There was one where a man decided to kill all the kids in a small schoolhouse out in Iowa or Nebraska or something like that, set off the boiler so that it exploded and killed everybody in the building. It wasn't a deliberate act, but there was a story about an explosion in a Texas high school that was like in the gas fields or something like that. And some gas built up in the school and exploded and killed like the entire school class of this one high school out in Texas. So it's out there, right? But this specifically, I was thinking about like how the bullying triggers her to kill everybody.
Yeah.
I was thinking how that almost seems like that's why they did you ever read, there was a book about Columbine just called Columbine that gets into what really happened. Like years later, they did like a, like literary journalism kind of take on it where they get into what happened. And really the bullying narrative isn't what happened. Like nobody was bullying those kids.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I wonder if Carrie and things like it are the reason why people sort of put that narrative on the Columbine. They're like, oh, you bully a kid and then they snap and murder everyone. Is that trope from this book?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean,
especially and also from the film as well.
Basketball Diaries was kind of criticized for that scene in the movie and from the original book, where he walks into school wearing a trench coat, pulls out a shotgun, and starts shooting kids.
I don't remember that in Basketball Diaries.
Basketball Diaries, yeah.
Does that actually happen, or is that like a fantasy?
It's a fantasy, and that's the thing.
Oh, okay.
It's fantasizing. Okay. But remember the kids in Columbine? They called themselves the Trench Coat Mafia, and stuff like that. And in the movie and in the book, he's wearing a trench coat and he's got a shotgun. Those were like to get revenge on society. It's this angst that this generation kind of had. In our previous podcast, like 3 weeks ago, I can't believe I still remember this. Like it's fresh in my mind.
Right.
You referenced Pearl Jam, Jeremy, right?
Jeremy, yeah, exactly. I was thinking about that. Yeah.
And it wasn't because he was being bullied. It was because like his mom and dad.
No, they're picking on him.
Well,
clearly, I remember
picking on the boy. Yeah, I see harmless little something. But he had other problems too. But and the problems at home, his mom and dad neglected him, and all this other stuff. So,
it's similar because if you think about it, Eddie Vedder, I'm assuming it's him who wrote the lyrics of the song, but admitting that he picked on the kid and that he feels bad about picking on the kid is what Sue is doing in this book. It's like she participated in the hazing and the picking on the girl, but she's like, oh, I really shouldn't have done that. But she admits she comes clean and admits that she did it, but she's like, that was a really crappy thing to do. So that's
and she admits that she's done it their entire life. Like she's always, but she says she's never been the instigator.
Right.
But she's always participated.
Yeah.
Which is, I can see that. I don't know. I remember when I was a kid, I was getting picked on by this kid named Donald. And he would sit with like his little cronies in the back of the bus. He was always picking on me on the bus and just being a total jerk. And he would get everybody else to laugh because, he was kind of the ringleader. And so he would pick on me and everybody would laugh at me because he was picking on me.
They'll laugh at you.
Yeah, exactly. And so one day we get to school and I stood up and I'm towards the front of the bus and he's just mouthing off about me at the front of the bus. Everybody's laughing. All those little cronies running and laughing. I stood up and I walked to the back of the bus and he's like, mouthing off. And I hit him as hard as I possibly could in the stomach. I'd never punched anybody before in my life. And he doubled over, totally knocked the wind out of him. And then I just turned around and walked off the bus. I didn't stay there and do anything else. Never happened again.
Yeah.
Nobody ever picked on me again.
But that's practical. That's not you snapping and murdering everyone on the school bus. That's practical. You're stopping it. Right. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'm not sure.
What I'm saying though is I don't
think I ever had the strength of character to do that when I was a kid. I think I didn't really ever get picked on that badly, but it happened every now and then. It would never be like, I don't remember it ever going on for long enough for me to snap and hit somebody. But, every once in a while someone would screw with me in some way. Like, I was thinking about that with this book. Like, this doesn't happen to kids anymore, right? Like, this was just a part of life when we were growing up.
You can't bully anymore. I mean,
yeah.
And I'm not saying that with like a wisp of longing or anything like that.
You're not like, oh, the good old days.
I'm just saying like how much times have changed. Like, bullying it's terrible and it drives kids. It is. I mean, I guess on the one hand, maybe it does build character. I mean, I did that. I never got picked on again after doing that.
Yeah. In your case, I don't remember ever feeling like it built any character. I mean, like I said, I didn't get picked on in any kind of pervasive fashion. I was not like on the lower end of the totem pole in school or anything, but it did happen to me. And it's like some of my worst memories. Those are the bad times,
absolutely. No, they were not fun.
Because it wasn't always somebody, it's one thing if you're acting like a dork in some way and people pick on you, so you stop acting like a dork, then maybe it's constructive. But it's just people being cruel, like for no reason.
I think so. And I think maybe we have turned a corner. I'm hoping that we have, I know my kids don't put up with that. I think when my daughter was in kindergarten, man, she was so mouthy, but she was bossy and mouthy. And I remember that there's this one kid in class and he was bigger than all the other kids. And he would pick on the other kids. And my daughter would stand up for him and just tell him, that's not right. I'm going to go tell the and like get in his face. And so she would always go to the principal's office with him because she'd get into it with him. And so
an altercation.
So they'd send them both to the principal's office. And we were like, for the longest time, we were worried because she would always be at the principal's office. And then we went to our first like parent teacher conference for kindergarten. And the teacher tells us, well, this is what's going on. There's this kid and he's a jerk. And so she stands up and tells him, he's wrong and blah, blah, blah. And then, they get into it and then they both go, and we're like, oh, so she's standing up for him. And I think that happens more and more now. I think more kids are aware of, that takes place and they don't put up with it, Yeah,
that's great. That's great. I hope it's like that.
I hope so too, and I think, if my kids, if I were ever to catch my kids like making fun of somebody or whatever, I'd kick their butts. But
I wouldn't put up with it. It's not that weird. The behavior is honestly not that weird to occasionally engage in some picking on somebody. It's pretty universal. I think most people, at least when we were kids, you get sucked into it sometimes the way Sue does in the book. You don't even realize you're doing it, or you don't realize how much is hurting somebody's feelings or something. And I think I probably gave as good as I got, to be honest. I think I got picked on sometimes, and I probably participated in picking on somebody sometimes. Not a lot of either one, but both things happen. I wrote a note here. And I was thinking about. I think like I don't remember there being a lot of picking on each other when we were in elementary school, but like junior high school age, like maybe like 11 to 14. I remember it just being like it was like a constant part of life, like everywhere you went. It was like the way I would imagine, like living in the jungle. Like it was just everybody was so cruel all the time. Like if you weren't careful, you really had to watch your butt. Like I felt really bad. I went to pick up Alex yesterday from his little school. I just kind of walked up to the crowd of kids and I was like, "Hey, I'm here. Like, you ready to leave?" And he was like, "Oh yeah," he didn't like want to look me in the eye because he was embarrassed I was talking. And I was like, "Oh, I felt bad." Like I think that's the first time I've seen him react that way. Be kind of like embarrassed that I was talking to him.
That's not
like,
cool.
Oh no, like not that.
What are you doing? Yeah, I've had that before too. My daughter, I remember my mom went to pick up my son and daughter at their school. And so my son comes out, gets in the car, really easy to spot, but my mom didn't know where my daughter is. So she spots her. And my daughter, I think, is in middle school at the time, might have been high school, rolls down the window and starts yelling for her.
Oh, yeah.
Ainsley, over here.
Yeah, that's terrible.
So my daughter's like, "Oh my God," like puts her face in her hands, like, completely devastated this would happen. I mean,
I had a really weird, maybe I can cut this later, so I don't know if it's relevant, but I was a substitute teacher. And I remember I taught this chorus class one day, and the kids were like all so talented and like so confident and stuff like that. And I remember this guy gets up, he was like about, I want to say he was 16 or 17, not like a little tiny kid, and he sang and he played guitar and he was great. And like, I just was really impressed with this young man. And then like a couple weeks later, I go to the batting cage and he's working at the batting cage, like selling you the tokens for the batting cage. And I was like, "Oh, hey, like I was your teacher the other day in chorus class." And he looks at me and he like looks aside at the other kids next to him. And he's like, "Gee, thanks for embarrassing me."
Wow.
And I was just like so shocked. I was like, you did not seem like the kind of kid that would have a thin skin like that. Like it was like a completely different perception of the person's character that I got from like the 200. It was so weird. But anyway, I thought you'd be proud of how talented. I mean, it wasn't. What the hell are you embarrassed about? Whatever.
I think it does.
By the time I was 16, I was not embarrassed anymore. I wasn't as sensitive by that age. Like once I had a girlfriend and a car and like
I think by the time I was like 16 or 17, my group of friends had formed, and you sort of have your own little tribe at that point.
Yeah,
and anybody outside, and you care about what the tribe thinks about you.
Yeah,
anybody outside the tribe, you're like, yeah, whatever, I don't care, whatever. Right. And that's sort of how I was. I didn't, I had my little tribe of friends. It was like 5 or 6 of us that we would always hang out and we would always do things together and stuff like that. And outside of them, I really didn't care. Like, whatever.
No, not by that age.
But before that, before I got to that point, though, I was sensitive to appearance and basically I just wanted to keep my head down and not have an appearance, because I don't want anybody to notice me, type of thing.
Well, what do you think? So to bring it kind of back to the book, not that we're not talking about issues about the book, but there's this Twilight Zone episode where there's a kid who has like ultimate powers. Like he can.
The cornfield.
Is that what it is? Is that what it's called?
I don't know. Is that the one where he wishes him out to the cornfield?
Yeah. He can like, so everybody, all the family in the house just lives in terror of him and lets him watch cartoons all day.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about that. Do you think if kids, right? Let's say that telekinesis was like a common power among kids. How many 13-year-olds would slaughter everyone in their junior high school?
Every single one of them.
I mean, it would happen all the time.
Every single one of them.
You could not give that kind of power to like kids, especially. Yeah. I think we talked about this in relation to something else we did, but the movie Forbidden Planet, which Stephen King, I think, references a couple of times in different things. But the movie is essentially about an alien race that develops like powers with their mind, the infinite powers to do just about anything they want with their mind. But it turns out that they haven't controlled the jungle-like instincts within them, like the bloodlust and id that's deep down in them. And so they end up wiping themselves out. And it's obviously a metaphor for nuclear weapons, for like a civilization that's developed nuclear weapons, but is still a monkey straight out of the jungle.
Right.
Oh, it was in Godzilla we were talking about this.
Yeah.
But I think that's what Carrie's doing too. I think Carrie has a lot to do with Oh, I know where Stephen King references the movie Forbidden Planet in the Tommyknockers. One of the characters, a little boy, gets teleported to another planet, and it's the same name of the planet from the movie Forbidden Planet. Anyway, Stephen King has seen this film.
Yeah, of course.
But I was thinking Carrie is like that too. And there's explicit references in this to nuclear war. When they kill the pigs, he hits the pig over the head with a sledgehammer, and he's like, "There you go. Now you don't have to worry about no bomb no more."
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I was thinking that's a really random thing to say.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
But I think Carrie's mental powers and the power to wipe out our enemies through fire and destruction is there's a metaphor there that's talking about nuclear war.
Well, and also in a child. No, I agree. I'm riffing on what you're saying, because Carrie she's a child. You know, she's a teenager. So she has these powers.
Right.
But she's not mature enough to really understand them or use them or control them or whatever. I mean, she can control them. She can use them to cause, but she doesn't understand the power that she has, which is a great metaphor for saying, like, you know, we're a bunch of dumb monkeys. You know, we can't understand, you know, these things that we're dealing with every day. Yeah.
And not to get too heavy, but obviously there's a feminist take on that.
Yeah.
Where it's asking a question, I think, metaphorically, what would the world be like if women had equal power with men? Like if women could violently kill men that bother them and things like that. You know, there's and it's obviously it's tied to her femininity in the book and you know, her sexuality and stuff like that. So I definitely think there's a whole other, this is why I think Stephen King sometimes feels like literature and why he gets criticized that way. There's some pretty good interpretive value going on in this book.
Yeah, there certainly is. Yeah.
There's some themes that you could actually spend a little time talking about. You wouldn't be wasting your time. It's like the way Quentin Tarantino's movies are like just barely good enough, high quality enough that you could really say some smart things about them and not be wasting your time. I think Stephen King's kind of like that. It's very enjoyable. It's enjoyable just on its surface, but it's got a little bit of interpretive context, so it almost hints at being something a little more serious. And that's why he catches like flack from people as a writer.
Right. I think that's a good.
They're like, "Oh, you think you're like a literary writer? Well, I'm going to criticize you like you're a literary writer then." So he gets, you know, raked over the coals. But I think we're we're probably about a little more than an hour in, right?
Yeah, we're there. So biggest surprise?
Biggest surprise for me was the epistolary thing. I didn't expect that, and I didn't mention it. But one of the weird things about that choice is that there's a little bit of tension in the scientific literature that's in the book about whether Sue Stern and her boyfriend set Carrie up.
Yeah.
Right. To have her do this. And yet that's resolved in the book because you have this third person omniscient narrative telling you that's 100% not true. And so it sort of waters down the epistolary thing. I don't really know why he did that. But anyway, the tragedy thing really works though.
Well, because nobody else would know that, you know, except for Sue.
Right.
She's the only one left, right? But we get that whole thing where Carrie enters her mind and looks for herself to see that Sue wasn't really, and it kind of like vindicates Sue in terms of like, now she knows that Carrie knows that she wasn't a part of it, and that like she can rest easy now. Yeah, my that was a surprise. I think my biggest surprise was just how sympathetic King made Carrie. Like, you know, in the movie, she's not at all. I mean, she's sort of sympathetic. Else, but you get so much more of it in the book. Like you can identify with her and understand where she's coming from. Like you feel sorry for her, and like Sue felt sorry for her and stuff like that. And so, you know, you said it was a tragedy, and a tragedy is where you have a great hero or something fall from grace.
Right.
And that's absolutely what you have here. But see, it's a tragedy because she's like an unrealized hero. You know, she has all this power, she has all this potential, you could say, and she has this fall from grace, and it's not really her own undoing, which is a bit different. Like a tragedy is typically, you know, the definition is that it's the person's own making. You know, the fall.
Yeah, that's the thing where it doesn't fit the classical tragic mode, right? It doesn't have like the tragic flaw, and it's like we said before, it's not really her choices that lead to this. Although she decides to murder everybody.
Yeah,
but that's like just one decision. That's just like
Right.
she snaps and gets. It wasn't her choices that led her to that moment. She's
But it
completely
is-
just
But
carried
you can
along.
see, like I said, a slow moving train wreck. You can see that the actions of these other people, what they're leading up to, and you're like, oh man, that sucks.
Yeah.
I know what's
Yeah,
going to
yeah.
happen, and it really sucks that that's going to happen.
Yes, exactly.
And so that's why you're looking forward to seeing how she kills these people.
Right.
You can't quite blame her, So
Well, that I think is what you were saying. It's not horror, but I think that there's a certain amount of like you said, like a voyeuristic sense of like, ooh, how is she going to kill all these
Yeah,
people?
yeah.
Like, that's what you go to horror book. You read horror because you're like,
I guess so.
how does this person die? Like, let me read
Right.
about these bloody.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Well, okay. Well, so I guess it's up to me, right? I have
think
the
so.
final
Yeah.
say.
Yep, and I definitely would vote for it. I really enjoyed it. I think it's up there with some of my favorite Stephen King books. It was good, and it's short, which is really is not always what I want out of a book, but it was effectively short, and I like that. I appreciate that.
Well, I will say absolutely, it's a classic. I like the book.
Okay. We didn't even talk about. I mean, this is Stephen King's first book. This is the book that gave us Stephen King, who's a huge cultural force. So we didn't even talk about that.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, Stephen King as a mythic figure, has done a lot for literature. I mean, for pulp,
pop literature, pop culture.
Yeah, pop literature.
Definitely.
He is definitely a pop icon, pop culture icon. So
I think so.
Yeah, but the book itself is a great book. I mean, it really reads well. It's a great story. There's a lot of depth. It's not two-dimensional, which I think is a problem with, a lot of these kinds of genres. You really have empathy for the characters and you can understand them and stuff. So I let's do it. Let's drink to that. We'll toast it.
Okay, great. Toasting this classic. All right, this is now a classic according to Dave McArthur and Clint Lanier. So
according to us, yeah, absolutely.
According to us, for what that's worth, right? Yeah, I think we're going to go ahead and sign off, right? I think we're done. I think
that's it. So thanks for joining us, everybody.
Good drink. I recommend this drink. Please, people, go out and have this, but be careful because I feel like maybe it'll sneak up on you. Because I got through most of a half pint of Captain Morgan.
I downed mine pretty quickly. So
so it's pretty easy drinking. Dave McArthur signing off.
Clint Lanier signing off. Thank you, everybody.
Peace out, everybody.
That's it for episode 64 of Toasting the Classics. For those playing along at home, get some lemon juice, apple cider, and maple syrup to make a lumberjack cocktail as we don our flannel shirts for a discussion of Nirvana's album Nevermind. If you'd like to get in touch, please send us an email at toastingtheclassics@gmail.com. Send us show ideas, comments, complaints, and let us know what horrible deeds you'd do with awesome telekinetic powers. Check out my blog at theattractivenuisance.com and follow us on Twitter at @RactiveNuisance. Our music was written by Michelle McArthur. See you next time on Toasting the Classics.